Okay, hi everyone, I'm back with your 315 lesson. It is called How Can I Graph It? Graphs, Tables, and Rules. Follow along as I read the introduction. In lesson 3.1.4, you practice setting up the correct axes to graph data from a table. Today you will graph a rule by first making a table and then by plotting the points from your table on a graph. You will also continue to find patterns in tables and graphs. So we're going to start with problem 343. It's titled Good Tipper. Mr. Wallace needs your help. He is planning to take his new girlfriend out to dinner. He will, of course, leave a tip for the waitstaff at the end of the meal. He decides to create a tip table that will help him quickly determine how much tip to leave. Part A says, create a table like the one shown below. What are reasonable values of X? Mr. Wallace needs a tip table that will help him quickly determine a tip for a bill that may occur after a nice dinner for two. Discuss this with your team and then choose 8 values for X. So I'm going to give you the 8 values for X. Dinner bill in dollars, we're going to have 10, 15, 35, 65, 70, 80, 90, and $100. Part B says, Mr. Wallace is planning to leave a 15% tip. That means for a bill of $10, he would leave a $1.50 tip. Determine if the tip for all the values in your table from part A, determine the tip for all of the values in your table from part A. This is Mr. Wallace's tip table. So now we're going to kind of do B. So we know that this was $1.50. I would like you to pause and I would like you to finish filling in your tip table. Okay, if you're back with me, we're going to go over and continue filling in the tip table. So, quick way to get a tip. If you have $15, I'm going to do this over to the side. If you move the decimal one place, so we would get 150, that's 10%. But we need 15%. So half of this would be 5%. So half of 150 is 75 cents. So now you would add both those numbers up to get your 15%. We would get $2.25 as your tip. You could also, in your calculator, take the number of your bill. So 15 times 0.15 would also give you your tip amount. So you should have had, for 35, should have been $5.25, $9.75 for $65, $10.50 for $70, $12 for $80, $13.50 for $90, and $15 for $100. Okay. Sorry about that. Part C says use the tip table to estimate the tip quickly if the bill is $36. What if the bill is $52.48? So I would like you to pause the video and do your estimations. Okay, if you're back with me, that means you have estimated for the Part C. We are going to talk about Part C when you come back to class. Part D says Mr. Wallace is worried that he may not be able to estimate very quickly if he uses his table for unusual amounts such as $52.48. He would like a graph to help him determine a 15% tip for all possible dollar amounts between $10 and $100. With your team, determine how to set up the axes, then graph the points from the tip table. Use the questions below to help guide your discussion. Should the tip be graphed on the x-axis or the y-axis? Read the math notes box for this lesson about dependent and independent variables to help you decide. So go ahead and pause the video, read the math notes box, which can be found on the last page of your lesson at the bottom, and answer that bullet point. Okay, if you're back with me, that means you have answered the bullet point. So we're going to say, hopefully you said that the tip should be on the y-axis. Because it is the dependent variable. Okay. The second bullet point says which quadrants are useful for this graph. Why? Go ahead and pause your video and answer this bullet point. If you're back with me, that means that you have answered the second bullet point right here. Which quadrants are useful? Hopefully you said just the first quadrant, because money cannot be negative. You never go to a restaurant and have them pay you for eating at the restaurant. You always are paying them, so money is not going to be negative. The third bullet point says, what are the greatest and smallest values of x and y that must fit on the graph? How can you scale your axes to create the most effective graph for Mr. Wallace? So we know that from the very top, it says he would like to graph to determine a 15% tip for all possible dollar amounts between $10 and $100. So that's how much his bill would be. So if you look here, we know that the tip is on the y-axis, which means the x-axis should be 0 to 100 because it's all possible dollar amounts. Your y-axis is then going to be your tip because we've already mentioned that. So if you flip back to your graph, you know at $100, your highest tip is going to be 15, or I'm sorry, flip back to your table, not your graph. You know at $100, your tip is going to be 15. So we're going to create a nice graph by going 0 to 20. So on my x-axis, we need to get all those in there. So pause the video, and I would like you to try and figure out what you need to be scaling by on your x-axis and your y-axis. If you're back with me, that means you have written down what you think you should scale by. So on the x-axis, you should be scaling by 5. And on the y-axis, you should be scaling by 1. Okay? So now your job for the rest of this lesson is to actually create your graph on graph paper using this information that we just kind of went through together and answer part E. Okay, and we will talk about the graph and part E when you come back to class. When you are done with this lesson, please make sure that you take a picture of it and upload that picture to Google Classroom under the assignment for 315. If you have any questions, as always, please email us.